Morning, everybody, and welcome to the first panel session at NAB 2025 in New York. This panel session today will cover facility modernization, so whether it be around upgrading an existing broadcast facility or moving into a greenfields facility. We've got a esteemed panel over here with representation from ABC, Versant, and C-SPAN. So if we don't mind going down the panel list, we'll start with you, Conchetta. If you can just give a brief introduction to yourself and where you are on your facility modernization journey.
Sure, thank you. Conchetta Murata, I'm the Vice President of Media Engineering at ABC News. And that I support all of the production facilities within 7 Hudson Square, which we recently moved to. So we're on the other side of our launch. We've launched all of our production. So run 24/7 support, sustainment engineering, architecture, and security.
Michael Hopper. I'm VP for Business Operations at Versant Media. We're spinning off from NBC Universal at the moment, and we have in our portfolio MSNBC, CNBC, E-News, Sci-Fi, Oxygen, the Golf Channel, a number of other sports entities. And we are 23 days, 21 hours, and 17 minutes away from launching our first broadcast of MS Now in our new facilities. So very close to the beginning of the race, and excited to get it going.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ahad Padi. I am with C-SPAN. I'm CTO there. And as far as the modernization transformation, we are in the early stage right now. We just decided that we're going to go with 2110, and we started designing the infrastructure, and we are in the very early stage. If we'll call that right.
Awesome, thank you. So obviously you're all at different stages, but everybody has a reason to upgrade or to modernize. So maybe if we can just go down and starting with you again, Conchetta. What were some of the key factors that caused you, in essence, to build a new facility versus staying in the existing one? And then what were some of the risks you were trying to avoid and or some of the new things you were trying to enable for the business users?
Sure. From a technology perspective, I think one of the really important things that we were trying to achieve is aligning all of our productions around shared technology, standard facilities to provide them more flexibility, get them the content they need wherever they want it and whenever they want it. And so that was a big driving factor. We wanted to standardize as well so that, from a sustainment perspective, we could support the facility and, have the most efficient workflows as possible. I think from a risk perspective, when you take on a project this big, we wanted to future-proof the facility. So as the productions changed and evolved over time, we wanted to make sure we didn't have to do technology overhauls as well to meet the moment. So I think there were some risks in, making the decisions, kind of evaluating that across the board, making those choices, and then, supporting two facilities through a transition is challenging and difficult from a people perspective. And then the third thing is the change management perspective of, implementing that level of change across the board.
For us, it was kind of the worst possible reason. We had a corporate divorce and had to do it. So we looked at it as an opportunity to, answer and solve a number of those questions, right? What are our main pain points today? Where do we want to be in 10 years? What are our opportunities to innovate? What direction do we want to head? And embrace those, right? Embrace the opportunity to change quickly and change the entire tech stack all at once. And, in our new facility that we're standing up, we're going with REMI production. So a lot of our technology is based in Englewood Cliffs, where C-SPAN is headquartered, or excuse me, CNBC, you're C-SPAN. And we have, a much smaller tech footprint where we are, but we're thinking now in the cloud a lot more than we used to, right? We're starting to think about being location agnostic with our facilities. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility long term to think about where we should be, where production should be headquartered, right? And our editorial staffs can be more distributed globally if we wanted them to be with a centralized tech standpoint, our headquarters rather. The main risk for us right now is time, right? And because time is the one thing we can't negotiate, right? At the end of the year, we will be separate from Comcast and NBC Universal. We have to make good decisions, right? And we have to accept the risk that comes with making a decision without the luxury of getting to do all the due diligence that we might otherwise want to do. So time is our biggest risk factor, but the opportunity for us is that we get to do it again soon, right? We're going to be building another facility soon, and we have the benefit of being able to do 2 cycles of a build. So while we are nearing the finish line of our first build, right? We already have our sights set on the next one. So it's an incredible opportunity to innovate twice in a very short period of time. We're tired, but excited about the opportunity.
So for us, it's basically the driving force was failing equipment. So our facility was built around like 10 to 12 years back and was done in multiple phases. So when we encounter, issues like, the switcher is not working or something which is basically malfunctioning and not behaving the way it's supposed to behave, we thought of like our team actually created a complete roadmap of changing things and see things holistically instead of like, just picking up the stuff, and replacing them. So that was the driving force, but along the way, we have seen a lot of other things, which technology is ready to offer, at this point right now. So we adopted those and in terms of like project, we included that in the project. And that's where, when we actually said, all right, fine, let's just wipe off the whiteboard just from the scratch. So right now, that was the driving force. But right now, the driving force is just to modernize transform our workflows and the workplace. And I would say from the challenges or the risks side, the cultural inertia, I would say, is one of the things. But also, the skill set, because we are going from physical stuff, from physics to the IP, right? So that's a different skill set, which is right now missing in the current resources pool. So that's, I would say, 2 biggest challenges, we have in front of us right now.
Thank you. So I'll pick on you one more time, Conchetta, for this one. Obviously, you had a huge build, right? I think your facility is 1 million square foot with, 17 studios and whatever else goes along with it, right? There's a lot of planning that has to happen for that. You can just explain to the audience some of the key phases that you went through, from the president coming along and saying, hey, we're selling the building and we need to move into a new building, all the way through to we got our first show live on air. So what are some of the key sort of phases in the program or in the life cycle you can think of?
It was a long road and very involved and intense at some points. But I think the most important thing that we did as a group at the beginning was align on what our objectives were and what kind of the North Star was for this project, so that everything that we did after that was in service of those things. And so once we aligned on that, it was really around assessing all of the workflows that we had and then understanding where can we find some efficiencies? How can we, do better when we have this opportunity to start from scratch? And we did that by looking at kind of breaking down the key systems into what we call top level systems. There are about 14 of them. And really working with the different vendors to understand, okay, what can you do today and what is on your roadmap, so that we could look for the long term and make sure that we were consistent in our mission. So once we did that and we selected our partners, I think that was, another big step. We selected partners not just based on one specific thing, but okay, what technology is available today? What's on your roadmap? Really looked for good partners in that. And then with, such a tight timeline and the need to move, out of the old building. It was really about, or at least the way I looked at it was, okay, what is the minimum viable product we need to meet? Let's make sure we prioritize those things first, so that as the different, obstacles come up throughout the project, which, things always happen, that we can pivot and we have mitigation strategies and all of that. So, but at least if we had that minimum viable product, we could build on it. I think those were the biggest kind of phases. And then as things came up, we just pivoted as needed and got to the end.
And then you also had the luxury of having a lab, right? To test some of the vendors, to test interoperability and everything else. How did that help you?
That's actually been vital to the process, because things don't always happen as planned. And, we need to, this is the building, it's so integrated now. All of the systems are so integrated, and, it's not like previously where you upgrade something and it might not have any impact on anything else. Everything is very, very integrated and can impact many things. So the ability to test some of the key upgrades and integrations that we have in the building has been really critical to being able to upgrade quickly.
And during your rollout, if I recall, you had waves of rollout of different shows, right? So like The View and others. How did that also help you test out the infrastructure and make sure that you weren't putting the best, brightest show at risk?
I mean, I think that was a big conversation with many people, operations, production, engineering, to come up with the strategy of kind of when we're going to move each show, what that means, what we need to do. And I think, that was all part of the prioritization process. So, we know certain shows utilize certain elements or technologies more than others. So which things do we need to really, what things are ready? What things do we need to test out first? We were preparing for other events at the time. So how do we kind of safeguard certain shows from, events that we need to do from the Uptown building? So I think it was just all prioritization and trying to figure out how the pieces fit together. And once we came up with that plan, pretty much stuck to that order of operations and made sure that we had, continued to kind of look at that minimum viable product that we needed for each of the productions to go live on time.
Right. And all of that was done during the election cycle, right? So for those of you that know news, know that that's the no-go zone. So, it was a Herculean undertaking for you. So well done. I think I'll hand this one off to Ahad. How do you go about selecting the vendors, right? Because I've just completed the detailed design phase for your new facility, and obviously before that you had a high level design of what you wanted. Take us through how you actually pick, which vendor is going to do your switching or routing, etc.
So I would say it's not that complicated. When you just remove the name, from the equipment. You just remove the label and just look at the capabilities, and just pick up the capabilities, map them, the user requirements, which we actually did, before we started this whole process. The first step was to go in, talk to everyone in the entire facility and see what's their pain points and what they want to see, in near future, or, as their ideal system, So we picked that up, we mapped them to the capabilities, and it was a simple, then the capabilities were our, kind of a template, which we used against, all of the products available. Once, when you have that mapping done, it's very easy. It just comes down to the dollar value then, because I can get, two different kind of switchers, but if both can do the same work for us and can match all the capabilities, then it's just, which one is less expensive or inexpensive, then that one, yeah.
Okay. So moving over to the technology side of things, and I'll ask you this one. Why did you choose to go with 2110 instead of SDI?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because
it is more expensive.
Yeah, it is
right?
more expensive. But and I'll tell you, there was no recency bias, in that selection. It's just we saw an opportunity over there, and the opportunity was mainly that it can scale without any problem. It's just SEO is great. Don't get me wrong. It's a great product. It's great technology. It's just it's physics. It's basically you have to have point-to-point connectivity, to make that thing work or make connection work. Whereas the SDI is more of like IP based. It's a one-to-many. Just to simplify that, because it uses multicast most of the time, and yeah, that was basically the reason why we went with 2110. And while we are keeping 2110 and as current, I would say, medium in our facility, we also looking at things which can be considered, as Michael said, cloud based. So whatever we installing, our guiding principle is that just to keep them cloud ready. And so when time is right, to move that to the cloud, we can't just simply unplug them and move them to cloud.
So I think, there's a tremendous amount of interest in the industry around cloud and, how it could potentially impact. I'll throw it over to you, Michael. How much do you think cloud is impacting facility designs today?
I mean, it's impossible not to say a ton, right? Like right now we have to be thinking about, two things, right? Like you're saying with the vendors, take the capabilities out of it or take the name out of it and think about the capability, right? And, as we think, when we were talking yesterday, right, the three of us, I think it was you, Conchetta, who said, we have to be thinking about everything everywhere all at once, right? And that's the reality of modern media production, right? Like when I almost think the name of this panel is a misnomer, right? Like broadcast, streaming, social, it's all converging, right? We're building facilities for content creation now, right? And we have to be thinking totally agnostically about, the initial endpoint that we made the thing for, and be thinking about all the various ways that our content can be consumed and making sure that our facilities are prepared for that. And at the pace that things are moving, right, investing in physical infrastructure, right, we have to be really, really smart about what we're buying and making sure that these are mission critical devices, right, versus, really embracing the scalability of the cloud. Like a lot of those processes are expensive today, but they're significantly cheaper than they were 5 years ago. And we have to anticipate that they're going to be significantly cheaper in the next couple of months, weeks, even, right? It's, to me, it's akin to thinking about SSD storage in the early 2010s, right? If you asked anybody back in 2009, right, why would I use SSD today, right? It's far too expensive. 5 years later, right, why would anyone think about using film unless it was an art house production? Right. And I think we're getting into that phase right now where the advantage of cloud-based production is, it's, you can't look backwards. We have to think about how to embrace it, and we have to be really, really smart about what infrastructure we're putting on-prem. Otherwise, it's a wasted investment.
Perhaps it'll be a Moore's law for cloud adoption or something.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
So you spoke about anything everywhere. And one of the things I think about with everywhere is the people that are accessing the content and doing production. So I'll say for you, Conchetta, how important was virtualization and being able to do remote access, remote editing, i.e. outside the four walls? How important was that to you in your design thinking?
Yeah, it was very important. So we wanted the experience offsite to be the same as the experience on site, and we really didn't want to have people have to give anything up to that. So that was really important to the design.
We have the same thought and conversation, right? We have a global, as do you, right? A global distribution with our staff. And, the advantage of a trickle down, production mindset, right? Something that someone does in New York can be picked up by someone in Los Angeles, can be picked up by someone in Singapore and Dubai and London, right? Without having to do the work twice. It's allowing us to be significantly more competitive, right? Then the other thing about news, which I think about more than anything else, right? Breaking news happens, and it has no respect for your schedule or where you are, right? And we have to be ready. I have my laptop with me right now, and if something happened, I would start cutting video if I needed to, right? And we need to enable our staffs to be competitive by making sure that no matter where they are, they can access any tool, right? And I think in the very near future, we're going to be talking about how we can totally virtualize our control rooms and have them accessible via VR headset even. So, your best director could be in, an airplane somewhere with a little bit of Wi-Fi and virtual, or he's in the control room suddenly, 8K display. What else do you need?
So that jumps to my next question or next topic. If you were to have a magical technical crystal ball that looked ahead 10 years in the future, Ahad, what would it look like?
From the technology standpoint, it's definitely going to be not on-prem. That's what I'm going to say. It's not going to be on-prem because if you look at the entire history of the media, we started from the baseband. It stayed for 30 years, and then we moved to SDI. It stayed for 20 years, so it's getting reduced. I mean, with the time, the time frame for each technology. And SDI lived longer because, we introduced HD, HDRs, 4K, and all that kind of stuff. So now we have 2110. And if I have to predict, then the lifespan of that will be shorter than the 2110. And of course, with all of these other protocols like coming forward, like SRT, and we can actually have close to lossless, kind of video. I think that the future of the broadcast is not on-prem.
Okay. What about you, Conchetta? 10 years in the looking glass.
Technology shifts very quickly, but I think it depends on kind of what the business problems are, right? So how we solve those business problems will, it's all dependent on how technology evolves and what's available to us to be able to meet that. Who knows what news business will look like?
I've got an interesting prediction for you, and I think this is one of those fun things for news. It's 2025, almost 2026. A problem we're going to have to solve in 10 years. How do we broadcast the Mars landing? And that's a real problem, right? It's how will broadcasters broadcast the Mars landing, and we're all going to be in competition about who gets the first live picture. So any vendors out there who can figure out quantum packet entanglement, I'm quite serious about this too, for live broadcast and doing it faster than light, we're interested. We're thinking about volumetric capture and how we can do holographic projection in broadcasts. We're interested. Right. These are the directions we're going. AR is a stopgap right now between, what we can do today and where we're going to go. Right. We all watch sci-fi movies, and, to think that we're not going to be competing in a three-dimensional projection space for consumers in the next decade, I think is foolish. Right. Like, we have to be ready for the future, and we have to be the visionaries who get us there.
Okay. I kind of like the idea, though, of a virtual production control room with VR glasses and not really tied to a physical facility, right? It's a pretty interesting concept. If we move into now the people side of things, right? Because when implementing a new facility, you basically have your core infrastructure that you're changing, and then often you change your workflows on top of that. How important is change management when going through these journeys? Maybe start with you, Conchetta.
It's critical, right? So, and change fatigue is real. I mean, our users were kind of physically moving buildings, the workflow, the technology, everything changed. So I think helping to manage through that was really critical. And I think for each production, we could adjust a little bit of what is most important to them, where are they struggling, how can we help? And, in some cases that was, we were meeting every day with productions to say, okay, what did you run into today? And gave them direct access to the engineers and the people who could fix the problems, or adjust workflows, things like that. And I think it was just really critical to have that because everybody still had their day job. I mean, everyone was still producing content every single day. And the engineers were still supporting 2 buildings. So it was a lot to happen at once. And yeah, I think without that, I think it would have been really, really challenging.
You, Michael?
It's everything. Like Conchetta said, right? You have busy engineers and busy operators, but you also have the businesses, and you have to engage really closely with every single one of your content creators and make sure that you're actually solving a problem, not creating a new one, right? That as you do that change management, you don't get, change fatigue, but you have to deeply listen and really be ready to hear that you made a mistake and acknowledge it, own it, and change, right? So it comes from your operators, it comes from your engineers, and it comes from your business. But every single one of those groups has to be engaged equally and listened to with respect.
I think that I agree with Michael and Katisha. I mean, that basically that is everything. See, the technology part is very small in this whole journey of the transformation. It's mainly, how people are going to accept that technology. And the change management is integral part, of any project. And it's better, like, if you involve all of your stakeholders early on in the project and get their buy-ins, on that, because that will smoothen, the surface or the, the pathway for the project. So I think the change management is very important, and we cannot have a successful project without that.
So specifically in your phase of your project, having completed the design, how did you engage your users to get them to the table? Like what activities did you do?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that we started from the requirements gathering phase of the project. We engage around like 40 to 50 people from different facilities, from different areas in our facility. And we asked simply, what are the pain points? What do you see, going wrong, or not working for you, in the system? And with that, we also ask question about what do you want to see in the future system? And that actually really, that is kind of like, their involvement in the project. So when we presented the product, or the capability to them, they were actually right there, this, all right, this is basically, the solution to my problems, or, the workflow, which was not working properly. So that's kind of a best way, to involve them, because without knowing, they're actually agreeing, into thing, and they are basically having ownership, into that process.
Yeah, I completely agree. Involving people early was really critical, I think. And, setting expectations that we might not get everything right out of the gate, but we're going to listen. We're going to iterate on some things, and having, in addition, also having people who are doing the jobs who can be advocates for the technology that you're implementing and the workflow changes, really helps get a lot more adoption within the facility. And so I think, all of those things.
Yeah, I think that having empathy with the end users and involving them and absolutely going after, what are the pain points? Because the number of facilities I've seen where there are hundreds of workflows that have been stitched together to get around problems, but then being able to go and say, we understand your problem, and this is how we plan on addressing it, which makes your life easier, gets adoption as well. In terms of, and I have this one for you, Conchetta, because you're furthest along. Upskilling your resources, right? So you came from a facility that had been there for many, many, many years to a brand shiny new object. How did you go about upskilling your engineers and operators with the new technology, the 2110 and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we had a massive training push right before launch and through kind of the first launch. We brought vendors in to do some formal training. In the lab, we did some, simulations to help people upskill on new technologies. But I think it's an ongoing process. I mean, we're going to have to continue to do that for a long time. And, I think it's one thing when you provide formal training, it's, people can retain that and understand it in the moment, but also like they need the practical experience to kind of keep the muscle memory there. So I think having the lab has been helpful for that, so that we can do simulations is really key technologies. We don't have that for everything, but it is a tool in the toolbox. So we use it as we can. But yeah, I think it's an ongoing process, and also listening to the people on our teams to say, okay, where do you feel like we need help? What issues are you seeing day to day? And how can we, focus on those specific things that we're seeing and provide additional help?
So I would say that burnout is a real thing, right? Especially as you mentioned earlier, where you have your day job and then you're building a new facility, etc. So I'd give this one to Michael, who you're just finishing the first building, and then I'm going to turn around and tell the users, by the way, we're moving again in 2 years. Apart from providing a lot of beer and wine and cheese to the people, how do you plan on overcoming that burnout fatigue?
Tacos.
Perfect.
No, it all starts with actually providing value, right? If you're going to ask users to undergo change, you have to demonstrate to them that the change that you're suggesting, the change that you're implementing, is actually making their lives better. And that comes from actually listening, right? And I'm reminded of Dr. House, one of my favorite TV shows, right? Where you go, you listen to the people, right? You hear what they say, but then you go observe, right? You embed yourself with the business unit. You actually understand what the challenge is, what the problem is, and you come up with a thesis about how you can actually improve the process for those people, right? And make a high value, high impact change that doesn't really impact their life that much, right? How can we, eliminate 3 systems by introducing 1 new one? How can we reduce the complexity in your day? How can we take out a little bit of pain? How can you stop having to check so many emails, right? And actually demonstrate through doing that this works, but you can't just roll it out, right? You have to be there every day. You have to make sure that your teams are present in the newsrooms with your creators, with whoever, and getting that feedback again, both by listening and by observing to make sure that what you're hearing reflects actually the way that your people are using the tools that you're creating, and making sure that you're ready to adjust and admit when you're wrong.
So for each of you at the different stages of your project, if we can end this off with, what are the 1 or 2 things that have surprised you along your journey? And I'll start off with you, Ahad, to give Panchetta time to think.
I would say the first thing is acceptability. I mean, I know we already talked about, the change management and the cultural inertia, but I think that people are ready to accept the change. And that's probably, one of the things which has surprised me. And I mean, I think that probably, the environment around us is like now that change ready, so that people are accepting, new things. But also I've seen that people are ready to get out of the legacy, systems, and they are ready, not to go into new legacy. They don't want to change just the equipment. They also want to change, the way of doing business. And so, yeah, definitely, those are 2 items I saw like it.
Mine's somewhat related to that. So when we were going through each of the launches, right? So first one being last September and then ending in June, it was intense. There was a lot going on, a lot of change happening. But what surprised me was after all of that, how quickly it felt like we had just been there forever in that building, and that, production was happening every single day. And it just, although things pop up and challenges happen and we have to fix things, and it just felt like we had been there for a long time, even though we hadn't. People settled in.
Yeah. The biggest surprise isn't exactly, doesn't feel like the right word, but the biggest realization through this process, for me, has been the importance of engaging not just our business units, right, and the change management process, right, the end users, but our engineers and all the folks who are actually working on this tech change, making sure they understand the why, right? Like it's one thing to talk to the business units and say, this is what we're doing, right? And it's going to make your day better. But you can't neglect the fact that you've got a lot of teams who are invested in products and have invested, decades of their career in supporting various workflows and doing things a specific way. And, the importance of explaining why clearly for all of the constituent groups has been the thing that, I've been reminded the importance of the most during this project.
Thank you. And with that, I'll open it up to this awesome audience. If you have any questions you'd like to ask the panel, we have a few minutes to cover any topics. Be shy. Good job breaking the ice. Appreciate it. Behind you. Behind you. Behind you. Behind you.
Hi, everybody. Where do you see your facility in like 5 years from now? What are we doing in 5 years?
Apart from stable.
I like your answer, Tim.
Yeah, that's the thing. When the stable, working, as supposed to work, and the workflows in a way that they are agnostic. As Michael said, that they're supposed to be agnostic in a way that we're not relying on any specific product. It's just I can unplug that workflow from one system to the other system without even skipping a frame. So that would be an ideal system or facility, in my eye.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you there. What I've seen within our client base is, there's an underlying technology modernization, which is, I'd call like core infrastructure. And then there's usually a parallel track, which is workflow or content workflow optimization. So once you have your core 2110 infrastructure, cloud, et cetera, how do you layer in your content workflows that are going to be enabling more people to access more content more quickly, that is outside of the facility? Didn't mean to cut you off there, Michael.
Oh, no, I'm glad you said that. But, I think there's two things that I think we'll be seeing in 5 years, right? One, greater global interconnectivity. There'll be less reliance and thinking about place, and more about, where the right person is. Content creators are key, right? It's more and more about individual and less about brand. So that's a segue into the second thing, which I think we're going to see is that we're going to have a different understanding of what is a production space, right? I think you're already seeing that with podcasts and anchors, reporters, correspondents just going live from their office and doing insane numbers on the internet. Everything is a production space now. And, especially with AI audio sweetening, right? You don't need a soundstage, to have, global quality, audio. You can just do it in somebody's office. Who cares? Right. So I think there's going to be a little bit more of a recognition of that. And we're going to start thinking a lot more about, everything's a set.
Anybody else would like a question?
How you doing? Speaking of AI, how inclusive is going to be AI in the future of your, growing in production and infrastructure, moving forward? How inclusive, or is there going to be a moment that you feel like there's going to be some pushback?
I think for us, there's, all of us have news in our portfolios, right? So I think there's got to be a really clear demarcation, and we're already starting to think about that, like in the difference between content creation, right? Like what we put on air and the production that goes behind it, right? So we have to set up really clear guardrails around content creation with AI and make sure that we're transparent about its use, right? And really methodical about where it's used. I think as a reporting tool, we have a lot of opportunity to derive insights that we couldn't before, right? Like scrape entire data sets. The entirety of the Panama Papers is open to us now as just a research asset, right? And in a way that it never was before. But then we start thinking about production, the opportunities for automation, to have a coding assistant for, a director who might otherwise spend a half an hour making sure that an automated rundown's ready, right? You can just plain text, speak that out loud and have the AI take over and do that. So I think there's a really great opportunity for innovation, but we have to make sure it works in the lab first, right? And be really careful about how we roll these things out, and be ready for some inevitable errors and blips. But it's an incredible opportunity, and one that we're going to have to embrace.
Just to add to that, I think, ultimately what you're saying is like it comes down to the problem you're trying to solve, right? And, technology and AI is a tool to help with a lot of the problems we have. So we use them when they make sense.
I think that the AI, since the launch of ChatGPT, we have different understanding of AI. Before the AI component was more of like locked behind the doors, but now it is like open. Everyone can use that. So I think that, it's a great tool. But where I see that integrating with the TV or the broadcast systems is more of when it comes to the automation. Automation is great. I think that it can be used over there. For example, as my colleague said, that it can help create the content, but whether that content is, prime time ready, or, we can put that online or not. Generative AI right now, you can see that, by looking at just 4 documents, you will tell, that whether it is AI generated or, someone wrote it, So at this point right now, as we are speaking, generative AI can help us to just have that head start, to complete the product. But again, I will see, going forward, AI is continuing to surprise us, so let's see, if there's more tools coming, our way.
But that does raise one of the challenges that we're going to face in our industry, right? Is how do we verify what's real, right? Especially as generative AI gets better and better and better. I think one of the challenges that we all across the news especially need to align on quickly is how are we going to approach watermarking and validating in a common standard, right? What is real, right? There is some very scary possibility if you can no longer distinguish what is real, if seeing is no longer believing, right? And as an industry, that's something we have to grapple with, and with incredible urgency, actually.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I see most prevalent or there's most interest in right now is more on the research side. So you could imagine, for example, there's a basketball game going on, and right now you only have a few producers that can produce the final promo clips or the highlights clips. But what if AI could take all the content and automatically create a highlight package per player, that then that content could be distributed out to multi-channels? So now if I'm specifically interested in a specific player, I can get more content around that player. So instead of hiring more people with more production technology, you can basically run it through a process, and suddenly that same content that you recorded is being used in other places. That's not necessarily generative. That's more on a research basis. Similarly, there's a concept around data-centric newscasting, where you're taking a lot of data and research, like Mike said in the Panama Papers, where you can actually get a lot of insight from data and actually create news stories around that as well. So again, more from a research perspective is where we see it impacting the industry at the moment, not so much from the actual sort of content creation side of it. Anyone else? We got a minute and a half. All right, with that, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate you joining this panel session. Thank you to the guests.